All right, this week on Picture You, we have a special guest, Kristen from Rapsodo. Before we introduce her, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. So today we will be covering what Rapsodo is, what it measures, gyro spin, different rotations, and so much more. So be sure to stay tuned. So Kristen, please tell us about yourself. What is Rapsodo and what it is that you do at Rapsodo?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. As Nicole mentioned, I'm Kristen. I am currently the product manager at Rapsodo. So right now, I'm involved in creating our new softball product, how to enhance it from based off of our original pitching and hitting 2.0 products. Before that, I was a softball coordinator here at Rapsodo. So I worked with all of our softball users and just made sure that they were using the technology correctly, tried to understand the data at another level. I was a college softball player and I got an engineering degree. So I always love how numbers related to my performance and how it could be used when I was coaching for those 6 years after before I started at Rapsodo. So very excited to talk about data and how it can be used in player development.
So I guess just start with the basics. What does the Rapsodo do? What does it measure for pitchers specifically? That's kind of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rapsodo is a radar and optical solution. So what we're doing is we're taking a ton of pictures while the ball is in air, and then we're tracing those seams. So we're not estimating really anything that's going on. We're actually really tracking the ball during that process. And so while we're getting those images, we're able to trace those seams and understand what the ball is doing in that flight path. So how the ball is spinning, how much of that spin is going to the break of the ball, how much is that ball breaking, and then at what speed. So we're really able to dive into everything that happens while that ball is in air and in motion and how it's affecting the flight pattern.
That's awesome. I love that this technology exists now. I wish we would have had something even like half of this when I was playing. So what are some of the specific measurements that the Rapsodo takes for pitchers, and what do they mean? How do they translate into like the real world?
Right. So really kind of what we go into is the spin, and that's obviously the important part of pitching is how much our ball is moving. So that really is determined on our spin rate, our spin direction, and then our spin efficiency. So those three things are really what makes the ball move, how much it's moving, and then where it's moving. So depending on that, pitchers can bucket themselves into a couple of things to understand, like, do I need to improve my spin direction? Do I need to improve my spin efficiency? Like really in those three buckets, where am I lining up to get the most break on this pitch to get the most movement? So that's really what we're known for as far as trying to understand and pitch develop and design these pitches to improve and get better.
So I obviously we use Rapsodo all the time. I loved using it just to help see, spin, movement. I use it a lot for rise ball, drop ball, all of that. But so I know how Rapsodo has helped me, but what would you say Rapsodo helps with the most or the best in your opinion? Like if someone new were to be looking at it, what are the key things that you think that they should be focusing on?
Yeah, personally for me, like I think Rapsodo shows you what you're really good at and then specifically what you can do to attack to get better. So we're not as broad. So being able to bring those numbers in, like I said, and maybe you're a high efficiency pitcher, but maybe your direction's a little bit off, right? So if I was trying to throw a drop ball, we want top spin. So 6 o'clock is going to give me the most down spin on that. Maybe I'm throwing that really efficient, but it's at 5 o'clock. So it's not getting as much drop. So I know now, hey, I need to work a little bit more trying to get that to 6 o'clock, but my spin efficiency number is really good. So really it's more so my hand placement or things like that. So we're not guessing as much, which is really, really good. But also what am I doing really well? Like maybe I am throwing everything really efficient. And so I can have the confidence when I go into the game to be able to throw things through the zone, making sure that I feel confident in that pitch and that it's moving the way I want it to. And we're not really going based off of feel anymore. Like, right, it's not feeling good, but like now we can kind of maybe translate that of like, what does not feeling good mean? Does that mean that, I'm a little early in my mechanics? Does it mean I'm like not letting the ball go as quiet as possible? But really, like you said, we're not trying to guess anymore. We're really trying to figure out what does the data say with what I feel is happening and like how can I translate those two?
Yeah, I've definitely felt that even in a bullpen. It's like sometimes it's reassuring to see like it might not even feel great on my end or that day, but then I see it and I'm like, oh, it looks good. Everyone else says it looks good. I'm just, it didn't feel great for me or vice versa. But yeah, I do think that it definitely helps confirm whatever you're feeling or what your pitch is doing. You can see it on a screen.
And you said something really interesting. You said, when your spin is on, if you could throw it through the zone. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? I think I know what you mean by that, but for younger pitchers or pitchers who are a little bit more inexperienced, how would you use different spin efficiencies and locations? How do you match those up?
Right. So really it's important of like how much the ball is breaking and where, right? So if the ball isn't breaking a lot, like we can't really want to throw that through the zone and make that a really recognizable hitter's pitch. We don't want to really start that in a really good area and then have it only break a little bit and still stay in a really good area. The best pitchers can start it and tunnel it in a really good area and then have it break through the zone and out of the area. So but you have to have the break with that. So if it's only breaking 2 inches, like, and you start in the middle, that's still in the strike zone. So if I have a pitch that I know is maybe 2 inches, I know I need to start that a little bit higher or lower. So it's not still in the strike zone when it's done breaking. So that makes sure I understand where that pitch kind of needs to start and have the confidence of like, where is it going to end as well? And where is that break kind of happening to make sure it's an effective pitch, because we can have effective pitches with 2 inches of break or 6 inches of break. That's the good thing about softball is it's so close, that the smallest amount of break really does change a lot, but it's just how to be effective with that pitch and where it should be your starting point at to make sure the ending point is in a good location.
I'm such like a data geek. I'm like, it's just awesome. So now getting a little bit more specific with spin, how would you describe, not necessarily describe, but what are the differences between 4-seam and 2-seam rotation, and how would you use those? How do you measure those with Rapsodo, and how can you use those, either one of those, to your advantage?
Yeah, so with 4-seam and 2-seam, when you kind of start talking about seam orientation, and the effect that it has on the ball, it really is the more seams that are going against the air, the more seam orientation you're going to have. So with a 4-seam, there's obviously more seams that are being thrown through the air, where the 2-seam is obviously just 2 seams. So how that should, in a pitching profile, in a robustness of what you have, is your 4-seam should have more movement than your 2-seam. That being said, like they should look very, very similar if the spin direction and the spin rate and all of that is exactly the same. So hopefully it's something that appears different. It should have a little bit of a different break profile based off the seam. So that's where it becomes, again, we talk about the tunneling, is it appears the same out of the hand, but it's going to do something a little bit different that the batter can't really pick up on. And so the reason because of that is just the amount of seams that are going against all the physics. So gravity and aerodynamics and things like that we won't get into today, but it's because of the amount of seams that are going against those forces, and they also play an effect into that.
Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of 4-seam and 2-seam fastballs. I teach both to my younger girls once they kind of master the 4-seam one, because it's an easy way to have kind of two different movements without having to overload them and teach them a completely new pitch when they're maybe not ready for that. So I'm a huge fan of 2-seam and 4-seam fastballs. Now, okay, what I'm most excited about, because when I grew up, this was like the worst possible thing you could have ever had. It was going to stay right down the middle, is gyro spin. And I know Rapsodo has a lot of data on this, and they're starting to show that, hey, maybe it's not evil. Can we go into gyro spin and maybe how we can use that to our advantage? Because I know like some pitchers like Nyjah Kennedy, she has, quite a bit of gyro spin on her rise ball. She has a phenomenal rise ball. So it's like, you can't argue that gyro is bad.
Right. So yeah, gyro is not bad. Gyro is just one part of the equation, and it's very easy to understand where it fits in your equation. So really it becomes a couple things, right? And again, this is where you have to learn, going back to the very first spot of like Rapsodo, is like knowing your numbers and what you do well, and then that changes things. So say I'm a high spin rate pitcher, which actually most people that throw up spin see a high spin rate, right? So maybe Nicole's spin rate is in the 1600s. I was a person that my spin rate was in the 800s, the 900s. Like I did not have a lot of like high spin rate. So Nicole's 40% is way different than my 40%. Like her 40% is still a lot more spin on that ball and a lot more rotations going to the right of that ball, where my 40% is different. So that's also what you have to know is her 40% could be 3 to 4 inches of break. My 40% is 1 inch of break. Those are two different pitches that can play. My 1 inch will not play as a rise ball, but Nicole's can as 4 inches, because that's a huge break number that we see in the upspin of softball, because it is very rare to have that. So it really is, how does it play in what direction when we talk about that? So like, if you have 40% at 11 o'clock, 40, that's a lot different than 40% at 10 o'clock. So there's also those couple of plays too. So we do like to focus on that one specific thing because we really have, obviously that's easy to see. I think that's why we've always focused on that too, is because we've relied so much on what we can see. And that was like the one thing, right? Like I can see when there's a dot on the ball, like the catcher can see that, the hitter can see that, me as a pitcher can see that as a pitching coach. So I think that's why we really focused on that specifically when we started learning more of the pitching routine. But now we can kind of understand how that fully goes in. And really, where does that play? So the second part of gyro degree is like, gyro degree is not bad, but you do have to have something that doesn't have gyro degree. So if that's a really high efficient down pitch, if that's a really high efficient curveball, those type of things, because at the end of the day, we want spread. So what is your max thing? So, but that's where it becomes bad, is if my drop ball has gyro spin, my curveball has gyro spin, and my rise ball has gyro spin. Now my spread is very small because we don't have a lot of things moving in different directions. So it's okay to have it. You have to know how it plays into what you're throwing, and then also how it reacts to other things that you're throwing, because we can't just have gyro spin across the board because all that's going to look the same. It has to play well with something else in your arsenal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting. So I work at a baseball facility, and so we use Rapsodo pretty often. And it's really interesting listening to the baseball side talk about it, because they talk about, okay, well, depending on the spin rate of your fastball, that changes how we want to throw your curveball and how much gyro we want on it, because it makes it more effective. And so just kind of learning how to, or that there are ways to figure out what is best for you based on your spin rate for another pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's just awesome. Is there any research that kind of goes similar to that for softball yet, or is it still a little bit too early?
Yeah, unfortunately, like thankfully we just now started getting in-game data. Like that's obviously when baseball got big, is when we started to have access to in-game data and see what played and what produced what we assumed was being produced. So softball, we're still learning. It's a great time to like be in that stage, but we still need a lot more of in-game data to start making kind of those comparisons and understand what happens. But I do think it's very interesting. The slider obviously is MLB. A slider is as gyro as possible. So even MLB, it's not bad, right? Or they wouldn't throw that pitch in MLB either. And so it's kind of one of those things where it obviously plays at all levels. It's just how it works within the pitch arsenal itself.
So cool. Yeah, even with just like throwing in my Rapsodo experience, my curveball and rise ball tailed very similarly. And it wasn't really until college where I could see that, like the Rapsodo would track, like there's like this little graph that they had. I'll try to find a picture and put it in. But my curveball and rise ball were tracking the same, like almost the same movement up and sideways. Like my rise ball was curving as much as my curveball. My curveball wasn't as rising as much as the rise, so but there wasn't any separation, and they both kind of have like a half gyro, half whatever spin. But it was interesting to see, once me and Coach Rocha started working on separating those two, you could physically see the difference on the app of like curveballs over here and rise balls up here. Like that's what we want, rather than them both being right here.
And I think what's important in that part too is like neither one of those are bad pitches, but while you're still working on that, maybe now I know, hey, we can't call those two pitches back to back right now.
Exactly.
Right? Like, they're too similar. So like while we're still trying to figure this out, like I know now I can't throw those back to back because it looks like the same exact pitch. So now I know I have to split those while I'm still working on it, because I think that's the other piece, is like we don't have to like deconstruct it and blow it up and get rid of that pitch until we figure it out. We just have to figure out how it works right now. Or maybe it is one that we have to throw out until we figure it out. But at least we can kind of play with it a little bit more until we start to see that separation a little bit stronger.
Yeah. And that's what
it's more of a data-driven decision rather than a gut feeling.
Yes.
Right. Or an observational decision.
Yeah, I always say it's not an evaluation tool. It is an assessment. Like we're trying to figure out what works well. We're not trying to say like that is a bad pitch, you can't use it. We're just trying to say like, hey, this is how this pitch kind of blends with everything else, or this is what can be improved on for this pitch. So it definitely is not a grade. I think a lot of people see that with the efficiency, like they see something and they're like, oh man, it's telling me this pitch is really bad, or it's not moving very well. And it's not meant for that. We're not trying to grade your pitches. We're trying to show how it works within your whole suite, and then also what you can do to make it better. So definitely don't consider it an evaluation tool. It is very much a player development tool on how to make things better.
Yeah, like I just had a student come in a couple weeks ago, and she has a really good rise ball. That's like her best pitch. And so she went to this camp, and she was throwing live and they had this on her, and she was getting a lot of swings and misses, swings and really bad contact. And then the coach came back and said that her spin was really flat. And it's like, okay, maybe that's what the data shows, but look at the outcome, right? So it's like you said, it is just an evaluation. It's not they're grading your pitch on it. So, keeping in mind outcome does matter.
Right.
Kind of bouncing off of, like the development side, what is something that you see consistent through Rapsodo's data that the most successful softball pitchers have?
Yes. So I think we kind of touched base on this with the gyro thing, is there is one elite efficient pitch. So whether that's a down ball or an up ball, is there's something moving vertically at a very high level. So either that is the drop ball that is pretty efficient, that's, you're seeing, I would say, like plus 8 inches of negative break, or you're seeing the rise ball, it's pretty efficient, that's usually above 4. You're seeing some elite movement one direction or the other. It doesn't have to be both directions, but at least in one direction, because we can find other things that play off that well. But that is called, like, we call that the spread or the window, or however you want to look at that in a Rapsodo chart. There has to be somewhat, we kind of always say, like 6 inches, like, so like something at the top of the zone, bottom of the zone, but there has to be 2 things that kind of do that. And then obviously you have to have a change up that tunnels, like, and that blends in with those that aren't like super different. So those are like something that moves vertically up or down, and then a change up that blends off of that are usually what every high level pitcher has in their arsenal to develop into an elite thrower.
Awesome. Christina, do you have any other questions?
I got nothing. I was having fun.
Awesome. Well, Kristen, do you have any additional comments or anything that we may not have touched on that you think is important?
No, I think it's great. I think Rapsodo, again, we've kind of always covered all of this. It's definitely not something to be scared of. It's definitely not something that you should definitely use as an educational tool, and that how I can get better, but learn what you do really well. I think that's what's great to get on it first, because pitchers are all different. I mean, I always think about that. Christina, we talked about it. Like, when I think about pitching and how I learned how to pitch, it's kind of incredible that we're able to be able to do it, in this time where it's like literally we're throwing to a wall and our body's figuring out how to move in air and release this ball at a high velocity, and we're using our body, and it's just incredible that we're able to accomplish that feat. So, but it's all of how we do that, because we're all built very differently. So like I said, I was a low spin rate pitcher, very, very low. Like, I only generated tops 900 RPMs, which I've learned now working at Rapsodo. And I think about that, learning that as myself, like being like, well, that would have been great. Like, instead of like really beating myself up, like trying to force my arm and body into a position to generate this backspin when it was like super slow, or like I just wasn't getting it. And it's not that like I wasn't good enough to throw that, like that just wasn't what my strength was. And so like spending a lot of time maybe understanding my drop ball better and like throwing that through the zone more and attacking harder with that, would have been great in my journey as a pitcher, and understanding that. So I think it's great to like see like, where am I at? What am I doing well? Have confidence in those things, and building a really good plan of things that you can execute that you're capable of doing. And it makes it a little bit simpler and takes that guesswork out. So don't be intimidated by it. I think we're still a little intimidated by numbers, honestly, in trying to understand it, but we're all learning together, a lot of it, and we have a lot of information now. But the more we share, the more we learn, the quicker this is going to be for everybody, and we're going to be able to really attack player development and have that resolution quicker.
And that was kind of the whole purpose of bringing you on, is to get this out there just a little bit more and share the knowledge, because the technology's there. We should all be using it.
Yeah. Thanks
again, Kristen. Really appreciate you coming on. Stay tuned for next week's video. And if you didn't already, please subscribe.
Bye. All right. Stay tuned for next week's video. Not made for that. It's just so not natural.